Hey, tonight we open a book so old it exhales dust with every turn your fingers trace words written in faded ink, and suddenly the page feels warm. There's a hollow space carved into the spine, just wide enough to hold a curled letter, still, sealed with wax, brittle and red. The initials are unreadable. The script is slanted, secretive. But it's not the language that confuses you, it's that half the words are symbols. Squiggles, delicate pictographs that almost look like eyes, or tears, or keys. You have no idea what it says, but you know exactly what it means. You're standing on the edge of something vast and buried. Not just a love story, but a war waged in size and silk, in pocket mirrors and pressed violets. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And if you're listening in the dark, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see how far this coded tale travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, it starts in a second-hand bookshop where the bell over the door doesn't ring so much as rattle like it's warning you. You're drawn not to the shelves but to the floor, where a pile of books leans dangerously against a stack of cracked porcelain. One volume falls open on its own, revealing a love letter tucked into a hidden compartment, a square of yellowing parchment that flutters as though breathing. The handwriting is unmistakably Victorian, ink thick as molasses. The occasional flourish so bold it's almost arrogant. But between the ordinary phrases, "My dearest, I await you at moonrise," there's a rhythm of symbols, a tiny sun, a bird in flight, a pair of scissors. Someone has gone to enormous effort to not be understood, and that's the first clue. In Victorian England, the one thing more dangerous than being in love was being caught. The mid-1800s was a period of bizarre contradiction. Britain fancied itself the epicenter of moral propriety, with Queen Victoria as its prim matron, saint, and yet beneath those laced-up collars and fastened gloves, desire pulsed like a vein ready to burst. It's no wonder lovers turn to code. You fold the letter gently, return it to its hiding place, and slip the book under your coat. That night, you dream of gaslight flickering against wallpaper, of footsteps on gravel, of breath fogging up a carriage window in the dream. Someone's lips brush your ear and whisper, "Find the other letters." Victorians were obsessed with secrecy. It wasn't just about avoiding scandal, it was about savoring it. Every rule created by society was a dare to break it. But while some found loopholes in shadows, others invented whole new languages too. Say what couldn't be said, the first mainstream historical fact to land here. The language of flowers was not just a cute pastime. By the 1860s, dozens of floriography dictionaries circulated through drawing rooms and parlors. A red rose meant passionate love. A yellow carnation meant disappointment. But a striped carnation, rejection. A wallflower, faithfulness in adversity. Bouquets weren't just pretty, they were manifestos. But even that system became too obvious. So lovers invented personal codes, ones no published glossary could decipher. A bluebell tucked behind a mirror might mean, "Meet me at the gate." A half-wilted daisy pinned to a cloak could be a warning, "They know." And if you're thinking, "Wow, that's a lot of effort to say, I love you," remember these people didn't have TikTok. They had time, ink, and desperation. Here's your fringe fact. One particularly peculiar cipher involved lace patterns. Supposedly, in a few corners of high society, women commissioned lace with specific weaves and dropped them in front of suitors. Each bobbin stitch stood for a syllable. Most people just saw a pretty doily. The intended recipient, a whispered proposal, of course. Historians still argue whether that lace language was ever truly decoded, or whether it was just an elaborate hoax that lovers clung to in hope. The truth, like so many hearts of the era, may have unraveled with time. But back to you. You're not asleep yet. You're back in your room, candlelight flickering, the stolen book laid open like a confession. You try sketching the symbols you saw, one by one, the crescent moon, the blackbird, the lone pair of scissors. It's not gibberish, it's deliberate, and you swear one symbol repeats with steady rhythm, a keyhole. What's it trying to open? You think about who would write this. Way, not someone with nothing to lose. No, this is the work of someone cornered, someone clever enough to outmaneuver a world that didn't want them to speak. Maybe she was rich, with suitors hand-picked by her family, but a heart straying elsewhere. Maybe he was poor, employed in her household, leaving smudged fingerprints on her doorframe every time he dared knock. Or maybe they were two women, speaking across rooms with smiles too long and touches too brief. Because to be obvious was to be doomed. The symbols speak because the world forbade their voices, and as your eyes grow heavy, one final detail strikes. The ink isn't black. Under the candle's flame, it shimmers blue. That wasn't accidental. That was cobalt-based iron gall Inca pigment prized in the Victorian era for its permanence. This letter wasn't written to be forgotten. It was written to survive, to wait for you. The morning air feels like velvet stretched too tight. There's fog curling off the eaves of the roofs outside your window, and somewhere beyond it, a clock tower groans its way into a new hour. But inside your head, you're still in that gaslit bookshop, fingers brushing the wax seal of a letter that refuses to be forgotten. You make coffee. You forget the coffee, because your mind is somewhere else, a ballroom, a dress too tight to breathe in, a fan held just so at the edge of a gloved hand, and 1,000 unsaid things swirling across parquet floors. The Victorians were geniuses at saying everything by saying nothing at all. You find yourself imagining it, stepping into a grand salon in the 1850s, chandeliers dangling like icicles, music from a string quartet rising like steam, and a crush of bodies moving in elegant, suffocating loops. And that's where you are standing at the edge, breathless, corseted, a glass of something bubbly in your hand and a fan twitching nervously at your wrist. You're not just here to dance, you're here to signal, because fans, gloves, parasols, and posture, all of it was code. A fan held open in the right hand meant, follow me, snapping it shut with a loud click. Leave me be, brushing the fan's edge against your cheek. Love you, against your chin. I want to kiss you. It sounds ridiculous now, like flirting via Morse code and origami, but in a world where speaking one's mind could ruin a life, gestures became gospel, and you, standing under that chandelier, are suddenly fluent. You flutter your fan slowly, deliberately, across the room. Someone sees. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the evening. Books of fan etiquette were actually published and circulated among young women of the time. Titles like The Language of the Fan and Phonology or Ladies' Conversation fan claimed to decode the fluttering vocabulary of courtship. Some of it may have been Victorian marketing fluff after all. Selling fans was profitable. But the fact remains. Many women did rely on these gestural languages to maneuver around strict social codes, because everything was theatre, and every stage needed its cues. The gloves come next. Imagine slipping your hand slowly, tantalizingly, out of a white satin glove. That was more than a tease, it was a conversation. Gloves, too, had meaning. Pulling one finger at a time while maintaining eye contact. An invitation, dropping your glove accidentally. A request to speak privately, offering a gloved hand, instead of a bare one. A warning, not tonight. Of course, historians still argue whether these cues were codified or exaggerated in hindsight. Did everyone know the meanings? Or was it just a handful of high society rule breakers having far more fun than the rest? One scholar suggested that the supposed fan codes were less widespread than we assume, but once people believed in them, they became real. Like any good superstition. And that's the heart of Victorian coded love, didn't need to be universally understood. It only had to be understood by two. Now comes your fringe tidbit. There was one known case in the 1860s where a pair of lovers communicated entirely through dance card annotations. She would scratch letters into the wax surface of her card with a needle. He would reply by shifting her dance partners in a certain pattern. Together, they wrote a novel's worth of affection without uttering a single word. It went undetected for months, until, of course, someone noticed a heart carved delicately into the edge of a dance card. The girl was sent to Bath for her nerves. The boy was conscripted into the Navy. Their story ends, as so many do, in silence. But for a while, they had language no one else could touch. You pull yourself out of the reverie with a blink. You're not at the ballroom. You're in your apartment, the sound of traffic far less poetic than a quartet. But something about that lost world lingers, because maybe you've done a 2 cent, a text that only one person could understand, worn a sweater on a certain day, posted a photo with a hidden message. Maybe you've had to speak in silence. Not so different, really. That night, the letter in the hollowed-out book calls to you again. You dream in symbols. A fan flutters above your head like a moth. A glove falls from the sky. You pick it up and it bursts into petals. You follow the trail of flowers into a hallway of mirrors, and every reflection whispers a different phrase. I miss you. They can't know tomorrow. You wake just as a gloved hand reaches for yours through the glass. As you sit at your desk, you begin sketching something new beside the symbols. A fan, a glove, a waltz diagram. You realize this coded language wasn't random. It was cumulative, layered. A love letter wasn't just words. It was every look across the room, every twitch of a finger, every object dropped on purpose. It was a life lived between the lines, and you're getting better at reading them. You leave your apartment under a veil of drizzle, notebook in pocket, book in bag, and a strange compulsion dragging you eastward toward the park, toward the flower stalls that line the entrance like a parade of silent suitors. You don't mean to stop, but your feet do anyway. You drift past buckets of freesia, narcissus, violets, marigolds. A smell like sugar and earth and old grief curls in the air. Your eyes land on a cluster of purple heliotropes. The stall owner, a woman with hands like dried roses, says nothing. She just nods, plucks a bunch from water, and wraps them in brown paper. You don't even ask the price, because in Victorian England, heliotropes meant devotion, and the person who left that coded letter, the one hidden in a book, meant never to be opened knew exactly what they were doing. Welcome to the language of flowers, the most fragrant codebook in Victorian courtship. Take the bouquet home and begin decoding it the way you might pass a poem. Primrose eyes can't live without you. Forget-me-nots strew love. Yellow tulips, there's sunshine in your smile. Basil hatred, wait what? Exactly. The Victorians weren't playing around. A bouquet wasn't just pretty, it was potentially lethal. Imagine receiving a dainty sprig of rue, which meant disdain, or oleander, which meant beware, or lavender, which could whisper your intentions and not unnoticed. They created florid artillery emotions you could smell, and these codes weren't invented randomly. They came from myth, folklore, literature. Shakespeare's Ophelia handed out fennel and columbine to express betrayal. Classical authors spoke of lilies for purity, roses for seduction. By the time the Victorians got their gloves on it, flower speak had become elaborate espionage. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Between 1810 and 1880, at least 90 known floriography dictionaries were published across England and France. Some were tiny, meant to be tucked into a reticule. Others were oversized status symbols, with painted plates and copper engravings. No two books agreed perfectly. A camellia might mean longing in one and pride in another. But the point wasn't precision, it was plausibility. If your recipient believed it meant love, then that's what it meant. Intent was everything. Fringe tidbit time. Some lovers went even further, binding bouquets to create messages only a select few could decode. They'd use odd numbers of stems, or wrap them with ribbons knotted in numeric patterns. One particularly odd case from 1873 involved a bouquet of 12 sprigs of rosemary tied in a figurate loop, delivered to a married woman with no name. On the note, when questioned, she fainted. Historians still argue whether that bouquet was a threat, a tryst rekindled, or a clever ruse by a jealous rival. But what's clear is that the language of flowers was no dainty hobby. It was emotional warfare played out in petals and pollen dot. So now it's your turn. You lay out your heliotropes and begin arranging. Not for beautiful meaning. You add a sprig of yarrow everlasting love, a cluster of columbine foolishness. Because let's be honest, you're in deep. And a scrap of basil just to keep things interesting. You tie it with a red ribbon in a loose square knot. Not perfect. But passionate you set the bouquet beside the letter. Now you have two pieces of the puzzle. Symbols, scents, two ways to say what couldn't be said aloud, and you can't shake the feeling that this is how it started for them. To whoever wrote that letter. Maybe he sent violets through a servant. Maybe she pressed wild thyme into his glove before the carriage ride. And maybe they both understood that a word spoken could be denied. But a flower received was a contract. You remember reading somewhere on a trivia site, probably that Oscar Wilde once received a bouquet of green carnations at a theatre opening. His companion had sent them in secret. Green carnations meant unspoken desire. And now you're wondering if that bouquet was more than a romantic gesture. Maybe it was a warning, or a confession, or a dare. How many relationships, how many near affairs, quiet heartbreaks, hidden betrayals are buried beneath the soil of that Victorian code. That night you fall asleep with flowers still on your mind. In the dream you walk through a walled garden. Each plant you touch gives you a word. Hope, worry, wait. You reach the end of the path and find a single flower growing through a crack. In the stone, a tiny white daisy. Innocence. You pick it. Behind you, someone whispers. You understand now. You turn. No one's there. Just the sound of wings. Morning comes. You tuck the bouquet between the pages of the letter book, carefully, reverently, like returning a piece to a puzzle, and you realize, with a small shiver, that you've begun collecting this code without even meaning to. One letter, one bouquet, you. Don't know what's pulling you forward, only that you must keep going. You start to notice them everywhere now, mailboxes. Not the sleek, dull rectangles bolted to apartment gates. No, the Victorian kind, green painted, hexagonal, with tiny lion heads at the top and keyholes too narrow for modern fingers. You walk past 3 on your way to work and wonder how many secrets pass through those narrow mouths. How many hands trembled as they fed in forbidden letters. Because in the 19th century, the Royal Mail wasn't just a postal service. It was a lifeline for lovers. And every postman was part Cupid, part accomplice, part plausible deniability. It's easy to forget how radical it was before the 1840 postal reform. Sending a letter could cost a day's wages paid by the recipient. But then came Rowland Hill and his genius invention, the penny black, the world's first prepaid postage stamp. Suddenly, letters could fly across Britain for a single penny. Cheap, anonymous, untraceable. It wasn't long before lovers realized they could turn this new system to their advantage. You walk into a dusty postal museum that smells like newsprint and disappointment. Inside, under a glass dome, you spot a letter marked Brompton, 1854. The writing is smudged, but there's a tiny X drawn into the stamp's corner. You freeze. That's not random. That's a code in the Victorian era. It was common to use stamp placement to send subtle messages. Tilted stamps, upside-down stamps, even stamps stuck halfway off the edge, all of them meant something. It was called stamp language. Right side, up, bottom left. I love you, upside down, top right. I'm being watched, sideways across the top. Yes, torn in half. We are finished. Mainstream historical fact. In the 1860s, entire guides were printed in ladies' magazines explaining the meanings of stamp angles. While not officially recognized by the post office, it became a widespread way to bypass prying issues, where, when a servant or parent handled your mail. But here's the quirky fringe detail. Some lovers bribed local postboys teenagers on bicycles with cheeks red from winter wind to delay delivery or reroute mail entirely. There are even whispered tales of postmen hiding letters behind tombstones, stuffed into chimney flues, or slipped into hat brims during formal visits. One urban myth tells of a postal worker in Exeter who carried on a 2-decade affair on behalf of a couple. He delivered their notes by hand, memorized replies when paper was too risky, and even once forged a letter of breakup when the woman's family arranged her marriage. Historians still argue whether he was saint or saboteur. You try it yourself. You buy a pack of vintage stamps, online Victorian reproductions, penny blacks and tuppenny blues. You press one onto an envelope and tilt it sideways. The action feels criminal, intimate. Then you stop. You don't even have anyone to send it to. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe it's about understanding how desperately these people needed to connect. In a world where holding hands in public could lead to social annihilation, every stamp was a gamble. You imagine yourself in a narrow townhouse hallway, candle flickering, slipping a letter into a coat pocket before anyone notices. Every step to the mailbox is a heartbeat. Every sound behind you might be your undoing. Let's talk about red wax seals. Not the kind you buy at craft stores. Real sealing wax, dripped from candle to envelope, pressed with signet rings or buttons, in a time before envelopes were glued. Sealing wax wasn't just ornamental, it was security. A broken seal meant someone snooped. A missing seal meant the letter never made it. Some women used perfume under the wax. Others embedded threads of hair. One coded system had lovers press a signet ring sideways if the letter was safe to read. Upright if danger was near. Every choice mattered. You think about that first letter you found, its seal snapped, the wax still clinging in crumbs. Someone had opened it. Maybe too late. Maybe just in time as you walk home. The street seems different, narrower, older. You imagine the ghosts of postboys pedaling past you, caps askew, envelopes tucked under elbows. You picture gloves slipping coins into palms. A girl in a parlor, watching the mail slot with eyes that haven't blinked in hours. And you wonder, what if some of those letters are still out there, forgotten in attics, taped under drawer bottoms, tucked inside a lining stitched shut by trembling hands. Maybe the love didn't survive, but the code did. That night, you sit at your desk and begin drafting a letter not to send, but to practice. You use the pen your grandmother gave you, the one that leaks slightly at the nib. Dearest, you pause. You look out the window. You keep writing. Then you fold the paper into fourths. Press a red sticker into the fold. You draw an X over the stamp's corner, even though there's no address. You hide the letter in a hollow in your bookshelf. It doesn't need to go anywhere. Not yet, but it needs to exist. The knock comes just after dusk. It's not loud, more of a tap, like someone unsure whether they should knock at all. You open the door to find a man in a trench coat, more antique than dramatic, holding a flat parcel tied with black string. No words, just a nod, and he's gone. Inside, a box. Inside the box, a stack of pages, yellowed and stiff. And on top, in handwriting as delicate as breath, a single phrase: initiates of the order speak only in silence. You didn't order this. You definitely didn't deserve it. But you've read enough by now to know this isn't junk. It's an invitation. Tonight you learn about secret societies of the heart. The Victorians loved their clandestine clubs, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, spiritualist circles, fraternal lodges with passwords more complicated than most Wi-Fi. But alongside the marble halls and ceremonial daggers, a stranger kind of society bloomed. One built not on ideology, but affection. Couples and correspondents across England formed what modern historians sometimes call micro-orders, intimate. Secret societies of 2 or 3, with invented rituals, passwords, and elaborate ciphers. You read about one in your new documents. 2 women in Bath, writing under flower pseudonyms, lavender and fleur-de-lis, kept a coded journal for over a decade. It wasn't just about love, it was about survival. Each entry began with a drawn sigil, like a rose, a sign that it was safe. When the rose was missing, the other knew not to reply. Mainstream historical fact. There were documented secret diaries and societies in which personal codes were developed, not just for romance, but for shared experiences that Victorian society condemned. One group of London-based women writers, referred to only as the Circle, purportedly used modified shorthand in margin notes passed between books. These weren't just girls playing games. These were networks. Quirky fact for tonight. In some fringe circles, especially among spiritualists, there was a belief that shared, telepathic symbols could be transmitted through writing. In other words, lovers thought that sketching the same image while thinking of one another could strengthen their emotional bond. Yes, Victorian telepathic journaling. You find an example, a small, spiraled figure inked into the corner of 3 separate letters from 1862, discovered in different towns. They were never mailed, never dated, and yet the spiral is the same, down to the imperfect loop at the end. Historians still argue whether this is proof of some esoteric method or just coincidence wrapped in drama. But as you trace the spiral with your finger, you swear the air in the room tightens. You begin experimenting. You and a friend, someone you trust, implicitly agree to a week of Cadonia messages. No direct language, just gestures, postcards with tilted stamps, emojis in peculiar patterns, a flower emoji followed by a fan, and it's thrilling, because suddenly you're paying attention to everything. You're reading between words, you're remembering what it feels like to be alert to the world. And you think about those lovers in 1874 who communicated through book titles alone. One would leave a copy of Wuthering Heights on a park bench. The other would respond with Jane Eyre on the same bench 3 days later. When the affair was discovered, their families burned every book they'd ever exchanged. Only the library. Card logs survived. You return to the parcel. One page catches your eye folded 4 times. Faint stain in the corner. You unfold it. It's not a letter. It's instructions. Step 1. Choose a shared symbol. Step 2. Assign it to an object you both own. Step 3. When apart, touch the object with your left hand. Then write what you cannot say. Step 4. Burn the paper. Keep the ash dot. It ends with the phrase, "If you ever doubt the code, whisper the ash." You laugh. It's ridiculous, beautiful, terrifying, and you believe every word. That night, you light a candle. You choose your symbol, a circle within a circle. You assign it to a ring you haven't worn in years. You write, "I don't know who you are, but I understand now." You burn the paper. The ash clings to your fingers. You whisper, you sleep, and in your dreams, you walk down a corridor made of parchment and smoke. On every wall, the same symbol, a circle within a circle. When you wake, the ring is still on your finger, and you realize you've crossed a line, not just into obsession, but into initiation. The lovers who wrote in code weren't being cute. They were building sanctuaries. The journal arrives wrapped in oilskin and fastened with a tarnished clasp that requires a hairpin and 5 minutes of nervous fumbling to open. You don't know who sent it. No return address, no name. Just your own scribbled in smudged fountain pen, like someone knew you'd eventually learn how to read it. Inside, the pages are brittle but deliberate. The ink varies black, brown, green, but the voice is consistent, steady, yearning. You begin to read. The entries are dated from 1871 to 1875. Each begins with a weather note. Rain in the courtyard again, and ends with a symbol, a triangle, an hourglass, a feather, and in between, a life split in 2. By day, this author is proper, engaged, polite, anxious about her stitching. But at night, the entries tilt. They write of someone else, someone unnamed. The tone softens, deepens. She writes backward, slantwise, and eventually dash invisible dot lemon juice. You only see it when you hold the pages to the radiator. And even then, the words shimmer like ghosts. She stood at my elbow, and I forgot the music. We almost touched hands. Over the embroidery. I can't tell if she meant it. But I did. Tonight, you're diving into the world of diaries with double lives in Victorian England. Keeping a journal wasn't just common, it was practically expected, especially among the educated middle and upper classes. The belief was that journaling promoted moral discipline, introspection, and proper behavior. But, predictably, Victorians couldn't resist using that moral practice to hide everything immoral. Your mainstream historical fact, some well-known diarists including Anne Lister, the first modern lesbian, as she's sometimes called, used coded entries to conceal their romantic and sexual relationships. Lister's system was an elaborate blend of Greek algebraic symbols and zodiac signs. Her diary spans over 4 million words. More than a third is in this cryptand. For decades, even those who knew about the diary couldn't decode it. That's how determined she was to speak the truth without ever being heard. Fringe detail for you. Lemon juice, invisible ink, was used as early as the 16th century. But Victorian women reportedly kept small sachets of lemon-soaked fabric, or even scented invisible ink pens to write secret diary entries. By the 1850s, several etiquette manuals discreetly advised against warming one's journal for hidden sentiments, which, of course, meant people absolutely did it. Historians still argue whether most of these secret entries were destroyed by their authors, or if dozens remain undetected hiding in attics, legible only under the right heat or light. You wonder, how many invisible heartbreaks have been lost to cold winters? You spend hours deciphering just one page. The visible ink is stiff and neat. Today I practiced my calligraphy. Miss Fenton visited. We discussed starch, but over the radiator a softer truth rises. She touched my hand. I was not prepared. I fear my fingers burned, but she did not withdraw hers. The contrast is stunning. A life within a life. One you show and one you breathe into paper, praying the heat will one day bring it back. You think of your own notebooks, all the filtered thoughts, all the places where you crossed out something to honest. You test a blank page with lemon juice and a cotton swab. You write, if I told the truth, would you still look at me the same? Then you let it dry, invisible, hidden, waiting, and somehow, that feels safer than typing it in a message. Later, you come across something even stranger in the journal, a poem written entirely in mirror script. You turn it toward the window and read, if we are never seen, then we are never torn apart. Better the lie of safety than the light of the gallows. Chilling, you flip to the final page. There's no date, just a series of tiny slashes along the edge, like someone sharpened a blade there, or cut something free. You trace the shape with your finger, your eyes blur. You close the journal and place it beside the flower-coded letter and the red-stamped envelope. These aren't just artifacts, they're refusals. Refusals to vanish, refusals to conform, refusals to let anyone else decide. What mattered, you sleep uneasily. In your dream, you walk down a narrow hallway lined with journals. The spines whisper as you pass. You hold one, and it bursts into flame-soft white fire that doesn't burn. Just reveals. You read your own name on the cover. Inside, I knew you'd find this. You wake with your hand resting on the old journal's cover, and for a long time you don't move, because something has changed. You're no longer just decoding, you're becoming part of the story. You've been avoiding mirrors lately, not out of vanity, out of instinct. There's something unsettling about catching your reflection mid-thought. Journal still open, That fan of brittle letters spread across the floor like a séance, because now you see it everywhere. The flutter of fingers, the hush behind a raised brow, the narrowing of eyes that, if you knew how to read them properly, might be whole sentences. And tonight, you'll learn to read the alphabet of the eyes. Imagine yourself seated in a velvet box at the theatre. 1863. You're wrapped in layers of silk and social expectation. The opera swelling beneath you like a tide you're meant to ignore. But you don't hear music. You feel eyes. Across the stage, in the box opposite, someone is watching, not brazenly, not the careless glance of a stranger. This gaze is timed, rhythmic, intentional. The flick of lashes, a glance down, hold for 3 counts. Glance back, hold, blink once. Look away, it's not a fluke. It's not flirtation. It's a message, Victorians being too clever by half realized early on that eyes could do what mouths could not. They called it ocular correspondence, a polite term for eyelid, SEMAPHORE. Your mainstream historical fact. In several etiquette manuals from the mid-1800s, including The Art of Courtship and The Gentle Lover's Guide, there are full chapters on eye language, pupil direction, duration of contact. Frequency of blinking itch could mean something very different depending on the social setting. A brief glance downward, deference or shame, upward and left, uncertainty or waiting, holding a gaze while lowering the chin. I know, and I consent. Men were taught to look away quickly in mixed company. Women were trained to master the lingering glance. One look could be a scandal or a promise. Fringe detail time. A short-lived London publication in 1872 called The Wink Weekly claimed to decode high society flirtations by analyzing who blinked at whom at which events. A gossip column of ocular scandals. It was shut down after 8 issues. Too accurate, apparently. Historians still argue whether it was satire or genuinely sourced from informants inside the aristocracy. One surviving column refers to a lady, B, who blinked thrice at a Miss A across the Covent Garden dress. Circle scandalous indeed. You test it yourself. At a cafe you meet a friend. You decide not to speak. You simply sit and let your eyes do the talking. You raise your brow. They raise theirs. You glance toward the window. They follow your gaze, then smile. Soon, you've established a rhythm. No words, just shared attention. It's awkward, then hilarious, then oddly intimate, like you've slipped into a room no one else can enter. You return to your trove of coded artifacts. One of the letters, previously overlooked, is a single sheet with no writing. But when you hold it up to the light, you notice faint creases, dots, tiny pinholes pricked into the paper, a sequence almost braille but different. You overlay it on a Morse code chart. Nothing. Then it hits you. This isn't sound-based. It's blink-based. You recreate it in a mirror. Pause. Blink. Blink. Long blink. The message is short. 3 words, but your breath catches. I see you. You wonder how many moments passed in public spaces, train stations, pews, drawing rooms where 2 people sustained entire conversations with nothing but eye contact and resolve. A glance through a curtain could confirm a meeting. A blink through a carriage window might postpone a rendezvous. 2 outsiders. Boredom, coincidence, nothing to see, but to those in the know, it was everything. You sit with your journal that night and experiment. You draw eye diagrams, lids half closed, arrows, timed blinks. You assign each emotion a pattern. Jealousy, short, long, short. Longing, blink, pause, blink. Regret, 3 slow blinks, then eyes down. You rehearse them in the mirror until your reflection feels like someone else. Someone from another time. Someone with something to say. In your dream, you're at the opera. The room is full of masks, white porcelain, motionless. Only one pair of eyes watches you. You try not to look, but you have to. You blink once. Slowly, they blink back, then tilt their head, like asking a question. You nod, and suddenly the room vanishes, leaving only those eyes, wide and waiting. When you wake, your heart is racing. You write, I don't know who you are, but I'm listening. You stare at the letter, wondering if someone, somewhere, will blink in return. Because in the Victorian world of coded love, it was never just about being seen. It was about being understood. The family Bible was never just a book. It was a vault, a ledger, a witness. And tonight, as you sit at the old desk with your fingers trembling over cracked leather binding, you begin to suspect it was also a mailbox, a hiding place for hope. You open it, gently its spine groaning like old bones. Inside the flyleaf, generations of names are penned in iron gall ink. Births, deaths, marriages, the usual genealogy of virtue and domestic order. But something's off. You tilt the book slightly and notice odd underlinings. Not in the family register, but in Psalms. Page 121. He shall give his angels charge over thee. Page 56. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. Page 34. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Each passage is neat, but faint. You suspect the same hand underlined them all. You flip to the back of the book, and there, folded neatly between pages, is a scrap of parchment with nothing but numbers. 121.11 to 56.3 to 34.8. It's a code, a verse, cipher. You read the verses in that order. Together, they feel more like poetry than prayer. It begins to form a message, a rhythm. Comfort, reassurance, ... longing. The person who sent this wasn't confiding to God. They were confiding in someone else. Someone forbidden, mainstream, historical, fact time. Victorian households frequently used family Bibles to record not only lineage but important events, illnesses, debt, even war letters. These books were often the only trusted safe in a house with no lockable drawers, which made them the perfect smuggling ground for secrets, especially the romantic kind. In one letter you find tucked inside the book of Ruth, a message reads, My dearest A, tonight at the hedge by the orchard read, verse 17, and bring the shawl with blue fringe. You turn to Ruth 1:17, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. A marriage proposal, wrapped in scripture, hidden in plain sight. Quirky detail alert. A now lost Victorian parlor game called scripture riddling involved finding verses that accidentally formed cheeky double meanings. One such line, often used, was from Song of Solomon. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, properly scandalous for Bible study. But it was all in good fun, of course. Historians still argue whether these games were genuine entertainment or a socially acceptable cover for romantic signaling. After all, what better disguise than piety? Back in your present moment, you inspect the margins of the Bible more closely. Some numbers are scratched faintly in the edges of pages, like coordinates. You start piecing them together, mapping out what feels like a narrative, a courtship. letters disguised as religious inquiry, verse references used as love notes, each one more intimate than the last. Page 90, draw me, we will run after thee. Page 219, let not your heart be troubled. Page 377, love is strong as death. And then the last, page 490, until the daybreak and the shadows flee away. You close the book slowly. Whoever wrote these entries wasn't just a reader, they were waiting. You imagine them perhaps a young governess in a cold house, her only friend a housemaid with silent eyes and shared smiles, or maybe a vicar's son slipping a note beneath a prayer book as his father preaches fire and brimstone overhead. Maybe it wasn't a single couple. Maybe this was an entire secret society of Bible coders, lovers whose only safe means of expression was through the Word of God itself. The ultimate irony, using Scripture to hide sins of the heart, or were they sins? Historians bicker about that too. Whether these hidden correspondences represent forbidden love or merely clever courtship. The lines blurges like the underlined verses. You try it yourself. You pull your own dog-eared copy of the Psalms and start scanning. The Lord is my light and my salvation. My soul thirsteth for thee. Thou hast ravished my heart. You begin underlining, writing numbers in the corners, and then just for yourself, you'll write a full message, made only of verses, a love letter you'll never send, a confession no one will read unless they already know the code. You close the Bible, but not before, pressing a small note into it, a fictional birth record for a fictional daughter born under a false name, your addition to a lineage that never was, and you wonder, with a lump rising in your throat, whether someone long ago did the same crafting a paper child so that their love might live somewhere, even if not in flesh. Tonight, the Bible rests beside you, heavy with stories it wasn't meant to carry, and you fall asleep wondering how many truths have been folded between pages meant only for parables, because sometimes the most sacred words are the ones that never made it to the pulpit. They stayed in the margins and whispered, I love you. You never expected to find a love letter hidden in a prison, but then again, you never expected to be in a prison, holding a candle stub to a crumbling brick wall, tracing the scratches that time refused to erase. The cell is cold. Stone sweats. The iron door behind you groans faintly, and you feel the sentries pressing down like another set of bars. They say this was once a political prisoner's cell, a radical, a pamphleteer, or maybe just someone in love with the wrong person. You run your fingers along the wall, agand. There it is. Not just initials, but full lines. A. 2H. 1874. Winds from the west carry no messages. I wait, still. God forgive me, I loved her more than my country. You shiver not from cold, but from something like grief or awe. This isn't fiction. Throughout the Victorian era, the walls of British jails bore testimony to more than just criminal guilt. They held coded exchanges. Prison graffiti wasn't just about marking time. It was sometimes the only place lovers could speak without a warden reading over their shoulder. Some carved in Latin, others in simple marks or repetitive lines, each representing a letter in a private cipher, in fact. One actual 19th century prisoner in Holloway passed coded notes to a lover by etching dots onto her cell bedpost using a spoon. No one noticed for weeks. The message, my body's here, but my soul walks with you by the river still. Fringe tidbit for you. Victorian anarchists sometimes trained pet birds to carry coded scraps between prison windows and boarding houses. One pigeon, allegedly, flew for 3 winters straight between Millbank Prison and a laundry girl in Whitechapel. Historians still argue whether these accounts are romanticized, tall tales, or real fragments of resistance, but they admit the birds were often found with colored thread tied to their legs. You move deeper into the cell and spot a small niche in the wall like a thumb-sized hollow. Inside it, you discover the fossil of a paper scrap. Water-damaged, barely legible. You hold it to the candlelight. The writing is tight, cramped, written in a minuscule hand, likely trained in stenography. Thursday, 14th. My dearest, you must never say my name aloud again. Use the lilies. The red ribbon means danger. The green means yes. If it is safe, wear it in your hair. I dream of the smell of your glove. A coded system using accessories, flowers, ribbons, touches. You think back to Section 3, the language of flowers, but here, it's desperation made delicate. Your mind runs wild. Maybe here she was arrested, not for pamphlets or sedition, but for the act of loving someone the law called criminal in 1885. The Criminal Law Amendment Act made gross indecency punishable by imprisonment. That vague phrase was often a death sentence to love between men or women, or anyone who dared write affection that crossed the rigid lines of Victorian propriety. Oscar Wilde's letters from Reading Jail are among the most heartbreaking ever penned. One fragment reads, "We shall never meet again, but I send you the curve of my mouth in these lines, and the ache of it, too." But Wilde wasn't the only one in lesser-known prisons across England. Nameless lovers wrote using every trick they could muster. Codes within chess diagrams, ink made from onion skins, messages embroidered inside shirt cuffs, sent out for mending. Some even bribed illiterate cellmates to carry memorized messages, turned into poetry so that if caught, they'd claim to be just humming a song. Back in the present, you kneel by the wall, brushing aside dust. Your candle flickers and you see it. A hidden panel, loose behind an old iron hook. Inside, a piece of cloth, stitched with clumsy thread, clearly once white, but now yellowed. Letters embroidered faintly in the border. Only the silence loves louder. You sit down, the cloth in your lap, heart heavy. Maybe they never escaped. Maybe they died here, bones cradling the last letter never read. Or maybe they were released and met again at a corner bench in Hyde Park, 20 years older, but still remembering the red ribbon. Historians can't tell us everything. They can date the fabric, they can test the ink, but they can't reconstruct the pulse in the wrist that wrote, "I dream of the smell of your glove." The wind howls faintly through a crack in the stone. You imagine it carrying whispers, messages, a fluttering ribbon from the past. In this silence, you understand what those prisoners knew. That language doesn't just live in ink. It thrives in code, in risk, in the spaces where speaking plainly would destroy you. And so they spoke slant, in flowers, in ribbons, in etched walls and smuggled shirt cuffs. And sometimes they were heard. You blow out the candle. The darkness is gentle now. The words on the wall fade into shadow, but you can still feel them beneath your fingertips, waiting to be read again. The classroom smells like chalk, ink, and anxiety. You sit stiffly at a wooden desk, your pen poised above the ruled paper, the curve of your wrist aching from hours of mimicry. The instructor, Miss Arkwright, starched collar, lips like pressed. Violets walk slowly down the rows, her boots clicking with a sort of authoritarian music. Again, she says crisply, tapping a blackboard filled with looping curves and slashes. Pitman shorthand. Dictation begins. You begin to write. At first, just what she says. Dear sir, I write regarding the matter of, but then your hand slides slightly off script. You tilt your strokes, tighten a loop. A dot becomes a pause in meaning, and suddenly you're saying something else entirely. Something not meant for your employer, something meant for her. You wouldn't think shorthand would become a lover's weapon. But in the Victorian era, when nearly every young woman trained to become a secretary, copyist, or telegraph assistant stenography became a silent rebellion, Sir Isaac Pitman's shorthand system, first published in 1837, was a tool of business. It was sleek, logical, and fast, but in the hands of the right people, it became an encryption method, a soul diary disguised as a job skill. One actual shorthand textbook from the 1870s contains practice phrases that start with standard business lines and end with things like, "She did not speak, but her gaze undid me." Some scholars think it was deliberate teachers embedding romance into repetition, maybe out of boredom. Others say students snuck them in. Historians still argue whether these extras were innocent slips or covert emotional training. In your story, you passed notes written in Pitman's curves to someone across the typing school's dusty benches. You slide the note beneath her blotter, acting like you dropped a pen, and she reads it, later, when the others are gone, when gas lamps flicker, and the windows sweat. She traces your strokes, knowing exactly how your S-curve softens at the edge of love. There were other systems too. Gablesberger, Greg Duploy, and then came telegraph codes, strings of numbers or odd phrases used to compress messages across wires. But just as often, they were used to say what couldn't be said aloud. 99. Roses in bloom might mean I miss you. Per contract, shipment delayed indefinitely could mean don't wait for me. In one preserved telegram from 1883, the seemingly innocuous phrase, "Situation secure, continue correspondence," was later decoded by historians to mean, "She is safe, keep writing. Your letters still reach her." You return home that evening with ink-stained fingers. In your rented attic room, you light a stub of candle and open your shorthand notebook, not to revise, but to record your own diary, written entirely in Pitman strokes. It reads like gibberish to anyone else. Just slashes, hooks, and scribbles. But to you, it's a confession booth with no priest. Today, she wore the lilac ribbon. I think it meant forgiveness, or hope, or that she remembered. You pause. The strokes are smudged where your hand trembled slightly. Your mother wouldn't understand. Your landlady would evict you if she could read a single sentence. But here, beneath the slanted roof, you write with complete abandon. Even your signature is a secret. Fringe fact for you. One group of governesses in 1889 reportedly started an underground publication, a love letter anthology written entirely in Greg shorthand. They printed just 12 copies and bound them by hand, hiding them inside copies of the Pilgrim's Progress. Only one survived. It was found in 1957 in a Cambridge second-hand shop, mistakenly catalogued as a counting reference. Inside, dozens of pages of compressed longing, entire relationships rendered in loops and hooks. You turn the page again, write another phrase, then another. Suddenly, you're not just writing letters. You're inventing your own glyphs, hybrids of shorthand, and your own curlicue, flourishes, a loop that means your voice still echoes, a double dash that says I remember how your fingers curled when you lied, a rising stroke ending in a dot. Please write back. I can't bear the silence, and she knows. She starts using your symbols too, in her marginalia, in the space between sewing patterns, on the back of a recipe. Your language becomes a living thing, growing, adapting, evolving with every secret glance, every half-spoken meeting in the library stairwell. One day your instructor catches a glimpse of your page. She stops, leans closer. What system is that? She asks, eyes narrowing. You look up, heart hammering. You could lie. You could say it's a French variation, a left-handed trick. But instead, you smile and say, oh, just something I invented. It keeps my thoughts organized. She nods. Maybe she understands. Maybe once, long ago, she wrote in code too. She walks on. That night, your beloved's note arrives inside a sewing kit. It smells faintly of peppermint and dust. The curves are small but unmistakable. You trace the symbols. You smile. New glyph, a crescent with 2 ticks, equals, I miss you so much, I forgot how to lie about it. You draw it once on the page, then again. You press your palm to the strokes. You feel them pulse. The world above may be buttoned up and iron stiff, but down here, between dots and lines, your love runs wild, and no one, not even Miss Arkwright, can read it. You wake to rain tapping the window pane like a code of its own, steady, insistent, secretive. The kind of drizzle that makes the streets blur like watercolor, that makes every corset lace feel a touch more constricting. But the letter in your coat pocket that loosens something in your chest, you read it again before breakfast. 4 lines carved from constraint. The clouds say nothing, but your last line held thunder. Meet me where the roses rot, at twilight, behind the glass house. You fold it carefully, twice, and tuck it back beside your hip. The glass house, that means Q, and the roses, those would be the faded ones by the south wall. The ones that haven't bloomed in 2 summers. That part was yours. Your clue. Victorian lovers, like you, were often denied everything: space, privacy, names, even acknowledgement. But they were gifted something else, a shared hunger for cleverness. If society insisted that your lips stay silent, then your pencils could scream. Welcome to the golden age of the floriography cipher. In polite parlors, bouquets spoke louder than words. Every flower had its meaning. Red tulip, declaration of love. White carnation, I'm still waiting. A withered rose, this might be over. It was a whole botanical language. And lovers, of course, weaponized it immediately. The Victorians didn't invent this practice. Assigning meanings to flowers dates back to Ottoman Turkey, but they codified it, published little manuals for it, and turned it into a full-blown obsession. Florists even offered silent arrangements delivered with no notes, just a silent scream of symbolism wrapped in tissue. But here's the best part. Lovers didn't just follow the rules, they made up new ones. That's where the code lived, in the flowers that weren't in the books, in the position of the stems, in the number of petals trimmed, in the direction the ribbon faced. One example, a bright yellow dahlia tucked upside down in a handkerchief, was never in the guides. But in one preserved diary from 1871, it meant he came back, but changed. You take the train through London, the windows fogged, the city blurring by like someone else's dream. At Kew, the air is muggy with the breath of plants. You Walk with purpose through greenhouses full of orchids and silence. And there she is, already waiting, standing near the skeletal roses. No hat, damp curls pressed against her cheeks. You want to run, you want to hide. Instead, you stand next to her like it's nothing. Two strangers admiring dead flowers. You exchange no words, just gloves brushing accidentally. She sets down a paper packet near the bench and walks away. Inside, a pressed sprig of honeysuckle, a crumbled marigold, and a single white hyacinth. You breathe in honeysuckle equals bonds of affection. Marigold equals pain and grief. White hyacinth equals I am sorry, forgive me. You smile, but you don't cry. Not here. You can't draw attention. Bye. Now, you two are crafting whole sentences using a shared bouquet vocabulary. You send a small box one evening containing 1 violet, 3 crushed forget-me-nots, a green ribbon in a spiralure, meaning you're not forgotten. I remember how you trembled. I'm still spinning. Your fingers shake after sending it, and when she replies with a striped carnation stabbed into a crust of bread, you almost laugh, because striped carnation, they mean rejection, but stabbed in bread, that's not in any book. Historians still argue whether a whole parallel language ever existed in food pairings, but fringe theorists believe clandestine lovers used meals like telegrams, pie fillings, wine colors, crust patterns, even how much salt was sprinkled. Victorian hosts often served their disdain alongside pheasant and parsnips. It wasn't that far-fetched. You start noticing these messages everywhere. A footman handing a wrapped bouquet upside down. A governess pinning a white poppy inside her sleeve. A market girl offering chamomile with no smile. Everywhere you look, people are screaming in code. You begin keeping a flower diary, adding your own meanings as they evolve between you and her. Tulip equals yes. Tulip stem broken equals maybe. Tulip with ribbon equals don't ask again. You're building a universe, petal by petal. The stakes rise when you're asked to deliver a bouquet for your employer. An engagement gift. Something lovely, they say, with irises, perhaps. You stare at the order, palms sweating, because iris, it means a message is coming. You want to warn the bride, but you can't, so instead you make subtle substitutions. A bleeding heart tucked near the base, rosemary for remembrance, lavender, but only faded blooms. No one notices, except maybe her dot. Later that week, you find a single nasturtium tied to your door handle. Nasturtium equals, I see what you did. Bold. Move. You laugh. Then quickly hide it in your coat pocket before anyone sees. One quirky historical tidbit. Some coded flower arrangements were edible. Sugar flowers, candy violets, even painted marzipan, pansies, all crafted and gifted in ways that said more than the sender could. One baker in 1892 was rumored to sell apology cakes laced with specific blooms, each petal infused with a wish for forgiveness. Not all of them were eaten. Some were buried that night. You dream of blossoms, of meaning, of an entire field of white heather and foxglove, where no one can stop your hands from picking what you please. And in the dream, she walks with you, hand in hand. No secrets, no need for code, just language blooming between your fingers. You wake to sunlight, sharp and unapologetic. The world has returned to its rules, corsets, chevrons, teac ups, but in your chest, a garden grows wild, and somewhere across the city, she is trimming a fresh bundle of violets. You already know what it says. You work late, the next few nights-long hours of dull chatter, silverware polishing, and escorting ladies from room to room under chandeliers that drip crystals like frozen sighs. But every time someone orders a bouquet, your heart quickens. It's become second nature, scanning for intention behind flower selections. A bride requests lilies. You flinch funeral flowers. A boy shyly asks for jonquils. A confession. You tuck in an extra. But when a duke sends red geraniums to a governess, you nearly choke. Red geranium equals you are stupid. Harsh, but you say nothing. Instead, you go home and write it all down. You and she no longer need ink. Your language is tactile, visual, botanical. On walks, she brushes your sleeve with a rosemary sprig. In the park, you pluck a white clover and place it near her glove. It's thrilling, it's maddening, it's dangerous. And then she breaks the unspoken rule. One evening, you find a folded page inside your bouquet delivery basket. It's tucked beneath the stems of chrysanthemums and iris. It's in her hand, and it's written in clear, deliberate code, not floriography, but an actual cipher. You stare at it for a long time. The code is in the form of alternating capital and lowercase letters, grouped by 5. You recognize the method eats a Vigenère cipher, a more complex substitution method than the simple. Caesar shifts of childhood. She's escalating. The Victorians were no strangers to coded alphabets. As the 19th century marched toward modern espionage and the telegraph, so did the public's appetite for secrecy. Newspapers published cipher puzzles. Magazines included courtship codes for subscribers to send. Cheeky phrases like "you are handsome" without ever writing the words, but the Vigenère. That was a spy's code, and she'd used it on you. You sit for an hour trying to break it. Key, rose message, BVYLEZRRQO, SREXBV OHEXNC. The result, once cracked, you were watched. Meet beneath the old clock tower. It doesn't make sense at first. You haven't seen any signs. No suspicion, but your gut twists. Because once again, you're forced to remember, this is not just a game. You meet her under the clock tower on a rain-slick Wednesday, boots squeaking on cobblestone. She wears a black ribbon at her throat tight, almost defiant. You wait until the clock strikes and duck screams somewhere in the canal. Then she speaks. They found a letter, she says. Her eyes are dry, voice lower than usual. One eye wrote, "I think it was my brother. He's given it to father." You blink. What kind of letter? She looks at you. You know what kind. Your blood turns to cold iron. Historians still debate how many Victorian relationships, particularly same-sex or cross-class ones, were discovered via intercepted letters. Some estimate thousands. Others think many were never even read, simply destroyed. But a few linger in the archives, tear-stained, burned at the edges, folded and unfolded like prayers. One particularly tragic example is the 1883 Amelia letters, a series of coded notes between two women in Brighton. The final message, decrypted decades later, reads only, "They are sending me away. Remember the lilacs." What happened after that remains a mystery. "I can destroy it," you whisper, but she shakes her head. "It's not in my hands anymore." And for the first time, you think, we may not survive this. You retreat further into code. You start adding acrostics to your flower deliveries. The first letter of each bloom, in Latin, spells a sentence. You layer multiple meanings into a single stem. You invent nonsense ciphers that only she would recognize based on the number of times she's laughed or the color of her ink. Your language is no longer passive. It's a rebellion. The two of you begin exchanging books, their margins, full of underlined phrases and torn corners. One day, she sends a copy of Tennyson's In Memoriam with a single petal glued to page 43. The underlined line. I hold it true, whatever befall. I feel it when I sorrow most. You press the page to your lips. She understands grief the same way you do, slowly, through paper and pressure and shared silence. One odd fringe method of coding love during this period. The glove alphabet. It sounds fictional, but it wasn't. It was a way of using the position of fingers, gloves, and stitches to convey messages. A woman might wear her gloves slightly turned, or place a finger through a loop in a very specific way at a dance. One glance, and her partner would know the answer to a private question. You try it one evening, resting your thumb over your second knuckle during a silent carriage ride home. She catches it, smiles. Message received. Are you afraid? Her pinky twitches once in return. Not yet, but fear does come. Because, a week later, you arrive to your flat and find the flower diary missing. No broken lock, no mess, just gone. You sit in stunned silence for hours, heart hammering like a bird behind glass. Someone's been watching. Someone has seen. The fear lingers for days. You pace your tiny rooms at night, listening for the creak of floorboards that shouldn't creak, staring at the doorknob like it might twist without warning. Your hands hover over every drawer. You tap every floorboard. You check the windows twice, then a third time for good measure, and still, the diary does not return. What does return is worse. A letter, sealed with no wax, slides under your door on the third evening. It's on thick cream paper, the kind you associate with estates and wills. The handwriting is florid, elegant, cruel. Discretion is not a virtue you possess. Consider this your only warning. Any further, indulgence will be treated accordingly. No name, no return address, just that word, indulgence. As though what you feel is gluttony. As though this code, this language you share with her, is nothing but a dangerous appetite. You burn the letter, but the fire doesn't soothe you. She stops writing for 5 days. And then, on the 6th, something arrives. A parcel plane, paper wrapped, tied with black string. Inside, a children's picture book, heavily worn, spine frayed. No note, just a title, Cloudberry's First Alphabet. You nearly laugh until you see what she's done. Every page of the book has been altered letters, painted over, images shifted. It's still an alphabet primer, but now it tells your story. A is for attic, where we met in June. B is for bloom, the first one you gave. C is for caution, which we tried and failed. D is for diary, gone now, maybe forever. E is for eyes, yours in the mirror, and on it goes. I is for invent. J is for just us. K is for keep going. L is for love. Your fingers shake, you hug the book to your chest and sob. It's around this time that the two of you begin to build your own language, not code, not shorthand, not borrowed ciphers or reworked fan signals. No, this is something new. You meet on walks and invent names for things. The tree near the canal becomes the green ghost. The whistle of the baker's son is morning bells. The ache you feel when her hand brushes yours is heart smoke. You create verbs that don't exist. To tharnal means to wait so long you begin to unravel. To sombercus is to look at someone without speaking, without smiling, with everything in your heart laid bare. The Victorians were famous for this kind of wordplay. Entire dictionaries of slang flourished underground. Thieves' cant, Molly dialects, navvy slang, and among lovers there were whispers of private tongues, micro-languages forged in diaries and exchanged over years. Historians still argue whether some of these were merely sentimental affectations or true linguistic systems. But what you and she are creating, it feels real, alive, necessary. A new grammar of survival. She starts wearing different jewelry. A silver brooch with a missing petal becomes your signal for danger. A bracelet of seed pearls means I'm listening. A carved hairpin gifted to her by her grandmother now means meet me after dusk. You both lean into it. Layer meaning into every object. You even make your own dictionary. She keeps hers bound in silk, hidden beneath the floorboards. Yours is smaller folded pages tucked into the hollow leg of a broken chair. You write entries at night by candlelight, cataloguing your shared language like a botanist describing a new species. It's both playful and deadly serious. One night, in the back of a church garden, she whispers, "We'll never survive like this." You pretend not to hear. But later, under the flickering light of your one gas lamp, you write a new entry to Heart Ghost V. To continue loving after one knows it cannot end well. You heart ghost her every time she smiles. There's one known case buried in the letters of Sir Edward Catherwood, of a couple who built an entirely private language over the course of 11 years. The fragments recovered, called the Catherwood fragments, included phrases like, "She wuthers my club," meaning, "She understands my pain," and "Tonight we shrindle, possibly tonight we are safe." Linguists still debate whether this was a cryptographic game or a heartfelt defense against a hostile world. You know the answer. In the park one afternoon, she brings you something unusual, a piece of soapstone carved with rough symbols. "I made us a cipher disc," she says, grinning. "It's clumsy, beautiful." You rotate the disc, and each turn gives you a new letter to swap. You test it. One turn clockwise equals A, becomes D. 2 turns equals A becomes G. SHE whispers, "Let them read our letters. They'll see only math." It feels like armor, but also like goodbye, because even as you build this world together, the outside world presses closer. Her visits grow less frequent, her smile thinner, her messages more desperate. One reads simply, "They've asked me to marry." Another, "He's 47, and dull." The third, "My mother thinks he's safe." You ache, you rage. But what can you do? You write a letter in your new language, 40 lines of invented symbols and shared jokes, and leave it behind the clock tower, tucked inside the roots of the green ghost. You wait and wait, but she doesn't come. You think of giving up. You stop writing for a week. To dot, but then, as you close up the shop one rainy evening, you find a tiny box by the door. Inside, a locket. No name, no initials, just a pressed violet petal, and a slip of paper with 3 words, "Still heart smoking." You put the locket over your head, beneath your shirt, and don't take it off for the rest of your life. You wake before dawn now, not out of discipline, but hunger, the kind that gnaws from the inside, the kind that isn't really about food. The streets outside are always wet, even when it hasn't rained, as if London exhales mist straight from its lungs. You wrap yourself in your coat and drift into your routine like a ghost. One foot, then the next. But your mind's not here. Not really. It's in the locket tucked beneath your shirt, warmed by your skin. It's in the symbols etched in soapstone. It's in a phrase that doesn't exist in any dictionary but yours. To winter speak, to pretend you're fine when everything inside you is shivering. The market is quiet today. Even the bread smells lonely. A vendor eyes you with suspicion, as if you've stolen something intangible. Like the warmth from the morning. You're halfway home when something stops you. A dog scruffy, copperhead tail twitching drops a scrap of cloth at your feet and trots away. You stare. It's stained, torn. You almost discard it, until you recognize the embroidered corner. It's from her scarf. Your feet move before your brain does. You follow the path across 3 streets, into an alley behind the church with the green door. There, tucked inside the gap beneath the old oak's roots, is a folded note. You once said we'd never have a garden, so I planted one in words. Every flower in bloom is a day I found you again. Underneath a drawing, childlike, sloppy, a sketch of a garden with 33 flowers. You count them all, 1, for every day since you last saw her. This is how she speaks now, through clues, trails, found objects. She's not allowed paper, she says, in a smuggled message hidden in a false-bottomed teacup. Her parents suspect everything. Her fiancé suspects more, so she sends messages in books, hides meanings in margin doodles at the library, tucks notes into gloved fingers at the tailor's. Once, you find a sentence stitched into the hem of a donated chemise at the charitable ward. My whole body misses you. You can't breathe for 5 minutes after reading it. There was a real case in 1889. In Liverpool, a couple exchanged a full romance through public charity books. One wrote poetry in the margins. The other replied in penciled prose between the lines. It continued for months before a librarian caught on. Historians still argue whether the authors were ever identified. Some believe the books were part of a larger code network among women unable to speak openly. Others claim it was simply one-sided madness. You know better. Your own methods become more daring. You hollow a space behind a stone in the alley Wallier Inkwell, where you leave folded messages in waxed paper. You wrap text around ribbons and tie them to laundry lines in sequence. Yellow, green, blue, meet, don't meet, safe, unsafe. You speak to her through reflections, no angles and mirrors, the pattern of drawn curtains. You live like a spy in your own life, and still, there are moments when it's too much. Like the time you see her walking with him, his arm looped around hers, her eyes forward, that smile, the one you know by heart, painted on like a mask. He's wearing a top hat. She's wearing your secret word, heart smoke, as a silver earring that dangles just once before vanishing behind her curls. She does not look your way, but later that night you receive a matchbox. Inside, nothing but written on the inside lid. I had to burn today. Tomorrow I breathe again. The Victorians were masters of double lives. A woman might attend sewing circles with friends while carefully planting political tracts under her skirt. Men in Parliament might debate morality by day and slip into velvet salons by night. Even lovers like you built palimpsests of reality one, life drawn over another, until only ghosts remained. Historians argue whether the strain of secrecy made these bonds deeper or more desperate, whether repression fuels romance or hollows it. You find yourself wondering the same thing, because some days you can't tell whether you're in love or in hiding. Then comes the breach. You find her note torn, half dash, missing the words. They found one of my books, the one with L through S. I said it was just poetry. He didn't believe me. They're talking about sending me away. You reread it 20 times. L through S, that section of your shared alphabet. The one with love, memory, never, oath, sent. Away, it's not a phrase you'd ever define together. You coin it now, to ashlock, to lose something while pretending it was never yours. You start using it constantly. There are 2 final acts in love like this, always flight or silence. You don't know which is coming, so you prepare for both. You buy ink in bulk, hide wax seals inside flour sacks. You write everything down, every invented word, every coded message, every kiss in shorthand. You don't know if she'll make it. You don't know if you will. But you write your garden 33 blooms, then 54, then 30-5, each one waiting for her return. Rain is what wakes you now, not the gentle, tapping kind, but a sideways, spitting deluge that clatters across the window like thrown pebbles. London has a particular kind of wetness, a hunger, really, that seeps through coats and walls and skin, until even your thoughts feel waterlogged. You sit at the edge of your cot, socks damp from the leak in the ceiling, and reread her last message, one you've memorized, line by coded line. It's only 5 words, embroidered in the hem of a handkerchief, delivered through a seamstress. He reads everything. Burn this, you do. You do, though the thread sings to ash too slowly, and you keep the smell in your hair for 3 days. You've heard the rumours for weeks about Parliament, the crackdown, the letters. At first, it sounded like just another moral panic, whispers of indecency. Anonymous notes passed at balls, intercepted vulgarities hidden in fashion advertisements. Then it turns to arrests, not for what people said, but how they said it. A man in Bristol is questioned for writing his betrothed a love poem in coded botanical metaphors. A governess is fired after her employer deciphers a shorthand passage in her notebook that might have been romantic, or merely poetic. Hard to say. But the implication alone is enough. The press starts calling it the ink fever. Parliament debates obscene correspondence. You find your breath catching when the headlines print a list of recovered ciphered documents deemed suspicious. You scan each line for familiar phrases: heartsmoke, winterspeak, ashlock, not there, not yet, but it feels closer every day. Historians still argue whether this was a real crackdown or a manufactured hysteria. Victorian politicians were known for overreacting to threats that involved women thinking independently, let alone writing independently, especially when those writings veiled something as dangerous as love that stepped beyond social norms across class, across gender, across silence. One MP argued that encoded letters posed a national security riskwart if French agents used lovers' slang to pass secrets. Another simply declared, if a lady must hide her affection behind riddles, she has no place in respectable society. He was later caught in a brothel in Shoreditch. But that's beside the point. Your secret correspondence has become an obsession, not just yours now, but others. In alleyway meets and behind curtained doors, people trade their cipher alphabets, pass on escape routes, discuss how best to signal danger in an ordinary sentence. It's not just love anymore. It's something wilder. One woman shows you a skirt hem, where each pleat contains a single embroidered letter. Another teaches you to speak code by folding your fan 7 different ways. They've started calling it the taffeta ring. silk and satin and secrets. They use gossip as camouflage, lace as encryption, corsets that constrict, yes, but also conceal. You remember an afternoon at the tea salon on Borwick Street, pretending to discuss hem lengths while passing a coded menu back and forth beneath. The table. One tap on the teacup rim meant I love you. 2 meant run. You both used 1 tap, then 1 again, then a long silence. The waitress refilled your tea 3 times and never looked you in the eye. Eventually, the ring gets discovered, or betrayed, or just too noisy for its own good. You don't know how it happened, perhaps 1 too many messages stitched too carelessly, or perhaps just bad luck, but a young seamstress disappears. Then a journalist who interviewed her. Then one of your safe houses, the alley with the brick you used as a drop, is bricked over overnight. You stop writing for a week, you start burning things, and then the pamphlets begin appearing, anonymous, fevered, typewritten with hasty ink. The lover's tongue shall not be chained. The heart speaks in many dialects. They cannot ban feeling. You find one tucked into the folds of your coat, and you don't even remember who gave it to you. It makes you laugh, which you haven't done in days. The humor is sharp, furious, almost gleeful. Inside one is a glossary of forbidden words. Oath glow, the heat behind a silent promise. Flinchlight, the moment you almost tell the truth. Ghost print, the feeling of being watched. After the letter's burned, you wonder how many of these are yours. You wonder how many lovers now speak your language. The irony of it all, of course, is that the more the codes are criminalized, the more people use them. You see handkerchiefs with suspicious stitching in church pews. You see children playing hopscotch in bizarre sequences. Someone's teaching them something. You see flowers arranged in shop windows in odd combinations. You start to realize this isn't about you and her anymore. It's about a culture of refusal. A refusal to say only what is permitted, to feel only in plain English, to love only when watched. Still, your chest tightens every time the post arrives. The knock on the door, the rustle of a plain envelope. One day, you receive one with no return address. Inside is a single phrase, treason or taffeta. And a pressed violet. You don't know who sent it. You just whisper. Yes, because even if they call it treason, even if they burn every hem, the memory of her breath on your ear, whispering a word only you to understand, blue latch, the door between. U.S. is stronger than fear. Outside, the rain stops, for now. You look out your window, on the sill. Someone has left a ribbon. It's yellow. You never agreed on what that color meant, so you wait. The ribbon stays for 3 days. It flutters sometimes when the wind skates through the alleyway, and each time it does, your heart jolts like a clock struck off beat. Yellow. You turn the meaning over in your mind, in your own cipher. Yellow meant hesitation. In hers, you're pretty sure it meant sunrise, or beginning, or was it warning? Color was always your weakest, categorizally confused, too mutable in candlelight. One of you once said red was dangerous longing, the other thought it simply meant tomatoes. You don't take the ribbon, you don't move it. That would be an answer. You just wait. And while you wait, the world outside grows louder. The government passes something grimly titled the Moral Correspondence Acta, real historical document, or so some historians argue. Others claim it was more of a threat than a law, a bureaucratic boogeyman crafted to scare lovers into silence. Either way, the effect is immediate. Paper merchants start reporting shortages of non-standard stationery to many people switching to hidden, watermarked forms. Ink sellers, especially those offering invisible ink formulas, lemon juice, crushed petals, arsenic tinctures, are suddenly monitored. Someone even claims the government is recruiting retired crossword writers as code breakers, which you really hope is true. You, like many others, shift your tactics. Letters are sewn into corset boning. Declarations of love hidden in embroidered Bible verses. One daring fellow is caught smuggling sonnets inside hollowed-out potatoes, and the ribbon remains. The truth is, you haven't seen her in nearly a month now. Her last known drop was in the gloved finger of a wax dummy at a department store. Ironic. You suppose that something made to be lifeless now bore your only heartbeat. That message had been different, less coded, more desperate. I think I'm being watched, or followed. I can't tell, I'm sorry. There'd been a smudge at the corner, and you'd convinced yourself it was rain, not tears. You haven't eaten properly in days. You spend your time now studying old code books, books nobody touches anymore, school primers, etiquette manuals, gardening guides. Any of them might contain the next secret. There's a theory going around that Victorian calling cards are all encoded, that every flourish and corner fold meant something. A flick for meet me at dawn, a curl for I saw you with her. One pamphlet suggests you can encode entire paragraphs in the way you fold your gloves. Another swears that lentius scent can carry meaning, rosemary for danger, lavender for loyalty, crushed mint for leave. Now, of course, not everyone believes these stories. One scholar later scoffed, surely the Victorians didn't go to such absurd lengths just to flirt. To which you whisper, alone in your flat, you clearly never needed to. Still no sign of her, and now you're starting to imagine things. A figure across the street, standing a little too still. A postman who lingers at your step longer than usual. A whiff of perfume you associate with herlac and brass, and a rush of adrenaline that tightens your spine. You check the ribbon, still there, still, yellow dot, and now slightly frayed. Then one night, the ribbon is gone, no knock, no message. Number, echo dot just gone, and beneath it, where it lay, a single card. Not a letter, not a note, a card. Pale ivory, embossed with a pattern you almost miss. Tiny dots, pinprick light across the surface. Braille, perhaps, or Morse. You run your fingers across it like a prayer. Nothing comes, until you hold it to the candlelight, and then, slowly, from beneath the waxy overlay, ink rises like bruises on skin. House of violet, full moon, come quiet. Now, if you were sensible, you'd burn the card. You'd take a train to anywhere else. You'd sell the last of your secrets and forget the name she whispered in your ear that night you shared a cab across the Thames, soaked and laughing and young. But of course you don't, because what has sense ever done for you? The House of Violet is not what you expect. It's not a brothel, though it borrows the name of one. It's not a club, though you need a password to enter. It's not a shop, though someone at the door asks if you're here to exchange and hands you a bundle of violets that hide a key. It is, in a word, a haven, built underground, down a winding staircase, behind a clockmaker's stall. The House of Violet is candlelit, quiet, and fragrant with crushed herbs. Dozens of people are there, some masked, others not, all carrying tokens, embroidered gloves, inked fans, wax seals shaped like beetles or stars. No one speaks aloud, they tap, gesture. Whisper codes. A man traces the alphabet onto a woman's palm with a gloved finger. She smiles. You haven't seen this many people communicating in silence since church. And then you see her, back turned, hair pinned high, the faintest glimmer of yellow still threaded through a braid. She is speaking to someone using hand fan, movements subtle and elegant. You almost can't bring yourself to interrupt. The moment feels suspended, like a sentence waiting for punctuation. But then she turns, sees you, and smiles. It's a tired smile, one that carries a whole novella of weariness behind it. But it is real, and it is yours. No words are exchanged. Reaches into her pocket and presses something into your palm, another card. But this one you recognize instantly, not from the ink, not from the embossing, but from the shape of it. It's been folded the exact same way. You once folded one for her. Right corner tucked, left side creased long. A notch at the bottom edge, like a missing tooth. The code was simple, stay, and so you do. You stay, not because it's the wise thing to do. There's nothing wise about this place. Not because it's safe, nothing here ever really is. You stay because her eyes told you more than the card could. Told you there's something left. Told you she still trusts you, even when the world now trades in suspicion like it's silver. The House of Violet has rules. No paper is kept overnight. No names spoken aloud. Each room is scented differently to help guide the blind or the coded or the sleepless. You learn the smell of jasmine means language, that sandalwood means departure, and cloves mean trust me. She takes you by the hand and pulls you into the saffron-scented hallway. The air is warm, here laced with the scent of pressed violets and ink, a coded warmth. And that's when you realize this isn't just a hiding place for lovers. It's a library, an archive, a cathedral of unspoken things. The librarians. There's a librarian, greets you with a nod. She has a face like someone who's translated war dispatches and survived 5 types of heartbreak. She doesn't ask your name. She gestures toward a series of alcoves. You walk past one that contains old fans stitched with phrases in Greek. Past another filled with gloves, single, soft, and labeled in careful handwriting. The fringe tidbit here. Historians still argue whether the Victorians actually used glove positioning as code. There's a famous illustration in a 19th century etiquette manual claiming that placing gloves on a table meant "I love you," but other scholars suggest it really just meant "please pass the salt." You step into a chamber with heavy curtains and no light. Inside, a projector hums to life. There's a film playing, no actors, no plot, just sequences of handwritten notes, letters unfolding themselves, teacups with hidden compartments. The camera lingers on a brooch that unscrews to reveal a message scrawled in reverse. The flickering frames make your heart beat slow and rhythmic. She whispers beside you, barely audible. They're trying to preserve it all before it's erased. And you realize what you're watching isn't history, it's resistance. They give you a room, it's hardly more than a cell. But there's a bed, a lamp with a red shade, and a single sheet of parchment folded into a crane, placed carefully on the pillow. You open it. There's nothing written, just the creases, and still you understand. Rest. You're safe. Your first night in the House of Violet is filled with dreams so rich they bleed into scent. Cinnamon for longing, rosewater for memory, ink for everything else. Days pass like whispers. You learn the rhythms. When to speak, when to stay silent. You meet a man who claims to have invented 5 alphabets for his dead wife. You meet a girl who says she speaks 20 dialects of love, but doesn't believe in any of them. One older woman shows you her tattooer, fan with 3 ribs, and says he promised 3 ribs, 1 for every lie he told. When the last one fades, I'll stop waiting. You smile, but don't ask questions. Outside, the world is still cracking. You hear about raids, about public burnings of immoral love notes, about lovers separated at train stations, never heard from again, about a man arrested for sending a comma to many. You don't know how much is true, but in here, the truth still has a pulse. One evening, you find a display room. It's filled with confiscated code, tools items, the outside world considered dangerous, a necklace that unclasps into a cipher wheel, a pair of shoes with hollow heels, a lace parasol with Morse-coded frills. At the center of it all, a corset, deep plum velvet, steel-boned and deadly beautiful. She's standing beside it, arms folded. I used to wear that when I passed messages through Parliament. She grins, that wicked sideways grin that started all of this. You don't ask if she still wears it. You don't need to. That night, you share a blanket. You say nothing, but in the house of Violet, silence is sacred. It holds more than language ever can. The next morning, there's a gathering, small, soft-spoken, lit by lanterns shaped like lilies. The librarian speaks. She tells everyone that a great ledger has been found, a Victorian love journal, coded and buried behind a fireplace in Devon. Found is maybe the wrong word. Recovered might be better. The pages are water damaged, but legible. You're asked if you want to help. She looks at you, eyes bright. The kind of bright you haven't seen since before everything shattered. Of course, you say yes. Your job is simple. Read, decode, transcribe, dot, every day. You sit with fragile parchment and cracked leather. Every entry opens like a wound or a kiss. Some are heartbreaks, to lovers signing only with the pressure of their thumbprints. Some are joyful, a recipe for jam encoded as a map of a secret tryst spot. One page is entirely sewn through with hair, another is just the same sentence, again and again. I miss your voice. You don't cry much after 3 weeks. You're allowed to copy 1 letter to keep. You choose hers, the one she first sent you, long before she ever signed her name. Before the inked crane, before the yellow ribbon, you recognize the handwriting. Instantly, though back then you thought it was an anonymous admirer. You don't know me, but I see you. The way you pause at doorways, the way you read the labels on ink bottles. You deserve someone who speaks in your alphabet. I think I can learn. You copy it by hand, fold it with care, and place it in the lining of your jacket, a heartbeat you'll always carry. The house of Violet will not last forever. It never intended to. Some safe places are only meant to exist between moments. But for now, the coded stories continue. New lovers arrive. New colors are assigned. New meanings bloom in the shadow of silence. You and she remain, not hidden, not brave, just together. And sometimes that's more than enough. The morning you leave the house of Violet, it's raining. Not the cinematic kind, no romantic mist, no streaked windows glowing amber. Just cold, grey drizzle that makes the cobblestones slick and your coat collar heavy. You step out with her. Beside you, each of you carrying a plain parcel, unmarked. The librarian hands you a paper sealed with wax. The impression isn't a symbol but a thumbprint, pressed firmly into violet wax. No words, don't open it, she says, until the train has left the city. So you wait. You pass under arches of soot-darkened stone, past gas lamps flickering, low, struggling to warm the fog, through an old quarter where messages once fluttered on washing lines back when lovers coded confessions into laundry knots and handkerchief hems. You pass a statue of Queen Victoria. Someone has tied a red ribbon to her wrist. Someone else has chalked beneath her, "Love in silence is still love." You and she don't speak. You haven't needed to. Not since the night you read the journal aloud in the lantern chamber and her hand brushed yours like an accidental pledge dot at the station. Guards in blue coats scan passengers. They don't check tickets so much as expressions. Suspicion has become a kind of fashion. You and she nod to the man with the clipboard. He doesn't look at your faces, just your hands. You'd practiced for this. You wear no rings, no ink, no visible tells, just a borrowed chill dot inside the compartment. You're alone. A miracle, really. The engine groans, the train jolts, and with a slow exhale, the city slides away behind grey glass. Only then do you open the envelope. It's not a letter, it's a map, not a geographical one. Either it charts emotion, a spiral of symbols, each labelled in faint ink: joy, fear, reckless hope, ache, anticipation in the center. If you ever forget how to find one another, follow this. She looks over your shoulder, breath warm on your cheek. That's the map we all carry. You smile, but you don't say you're afraid. She already knows. You pass through towns where love has become currency, where people trade coded scraps for bread, where stories flicker across windows in candlelight, not because it's tradition, but because it's survival. And still, even here, people write, on walls, on fences, on buttons sewn into coats. You see a chimney swept with soot inscriptions, a barn roof painted in curlicue Morse, a dog collar etched with coordinates. Historians still argue whether this late Victorian resistance was organized or spontaneous. Some say it was a movement of broken-hearted romantics. Others insist it was orchestrated by anarchist poets with a penchant for satin gloves. Either way, the legacy is undeniable. You arrive in a coastal village where the ocean is slate and the air tastes like brine and wild thyme. She leads you to a weather-beaten inn called the Listening House. No sign, just a doorbell that plays 2 notes an octave apart. Inside, the walls are papered in love letters. Literally dot, one of them catches your eye. Tell our children we built our love in silence, but never in fear. The ink is faded, but you'd recognize that hand anywhere. Her mother's. She doesn't cry, just traces the words once. With her fingertip, you stay in that village a long time, longer than planned. You teach the children how to fold paper swans. She teaches the fishermen's wives how to braid messages into nets. You build a collection of found phrases scraps you tuck into books or under pillowcases. The best one, kiss me with your quietest language. You write that one in chocolate sauce on a dessert plate. She sees it and laughs so hard she nearly knocks over the wine dot. It's the sound of someone remembering they can still laugh one day. A boy delivers a parcel wrapped in linen. No return address. Inside you find a spool of silk ribbon yellow, of coarse sand, a brooch shaped like a peacock feather. Hidden inside the clasp is a code wheel. You haven't seen one in years. Attached, a note for your archive. The world may forget. Don't. No signature. But the wax seal is unmistakable. A rose with 6 petals. You and she look at one another. That seal hasn't been seen in public since the trials in '89. The rose circle was believed dissolved, scattered, or imprisoned, but apparently not extinct. The note is a call. You don't answer, not yet. But you begin preparing. She writes by candlelight, again long looping sentences with hidden gaps. You begin copying passages from your memories, even the messy ones, especially the messy ones, because messy is honest, and honesty, in this strange new age, is the sharpest kind of love. The village begins to stir. New faces arrive with quiet voices and odd-shaped bags. One woman claims to be a gardener, but has ink on every fingertip. A man delivers fish and hums in binary code. The butcher keeps adding extra spaces between chalkboard letters. Someone's rehearsing something, and you and she, you keep building. The archive. Every night you light a candle in the attic. Every night more scraps arrive, a cufflink, a torn book cover, a mirror with a message etched in steam. Then one night, someone knocks twice. You answer. It's the librarian, older, thinner, but unmistakably herself. They found the second journal, she whispers, the one they thought was lost. You don't ask how she found you, or how she crossed 3 provinces without being noticed. All you ask is, what do you need? She smiles. That same tired, secret smile you saw the first time. Everything, and somehow, that feels exactly right. The journal arrives wrapped in oilcloth and bound with 3 different types of twine: red, ivory, and indigo. That's not random. You know better by now. Red, memory; ivory, risk; indigo, passage. It's heavier than you'd expect. Not just from age or weathering, but something stranger like it soaked up every glance, every whispered confession, every tremor of longing ever poured into its pages. You don't open it right away. Instead, you pour 2 cups of something warm, tuck yourselves by the fire, and wait until the candle is nearly low enough to stutter. Then slowly you untie the knots. The first page is a palimpsest. Someone's wiped an older text and written over it. You tilt the paper under the light. You can almost make out the faint ghost of earlier words. We met by mistake, or maybe by design. You run your finger along the sentence. It's not addressed to anyone, not really. It's written like a charm or a warning. Then below it, the new hand. For those who speak through silence, there's no name but the handwriting. It's hers, the rosewax girl, the original, the reason the codes began. You don't breathe for a full 10 seconds. And then you do, and then you read. Inside are pages written in a rotating cipher. You and she take turns decoding them. It's not tedious, it feels sacred. A new kind of intimacy, like stripping away the layers of a secret, not to expose it, but to understand it better. Some entries are confessions. I once wore her scent to a formal dinner and nearly collapsed when the violinist played her favorite aria. Others are plans. If this ink reaches anyone, meet at the Black Bridge under the 3rd lantern. Do not wear gloves. Still others are heartbreakingly mundane. She forgot my name yesterday, called me you instead. I answered anyway. Historians still argue whether this second journal belonged to a specific woman or passed through many hands, each adding a line, a page, a memory. Some claim it was penned by the daughter of a housemaid in Kensington who fell in love with a viscount's sister. Others believe it's the collected wisdom of a covert correspondence ring that flourished after the Anti-Sedition Act of 1873. There's no clear answer, but as you read deeper, the stories begin to echo your own. Not precisely, not literally, but in the curves and silences between words, the shared fear, the hidden bravery. You look at her. Are we repeating them? She shakes her head. We're remembering them. Soon after, the village changes. The children start drawing messages. Insult on the windowsills. An old man sends his laundry up the line, knotted in a new pattern. Even the bakery glazes cryptic words onto buns in cinnamon and clove. One morning, you wake up to find a line of boots, different sizes, mismatched, arranged in a spiral around the community well. A signal. The librarian confirms it later. The circle is reforming. Quietly, slowly. They're not planning revolution this time. They're planning remembrance. A way to make love harder to forget. You and she begin compiling your own ledger. Not a manifesto. Not a memoir. A guide, you call it the listener's lexicon. A living glossary of Victorian code love speak. From ink smudges that meant kiss me to paper fold styles that indicated the sender's intent, diagonal crease, danger, double horizontal. Come now, you teach workshops. They start in whispers. A few curious souls, then more. Soon people bring relics, crumpled tickets, scraps of letters, keepsakes passed down without explanation, and you decode them together. One woman weeps when you reveal her. Grandmother's sewing sampler wasn't just decorative, it was a stitched story of a secret courtship with the grocer's wife. I thought it was just flowers, she murmurs. They always do, you say. In the attic of the listening house, you create a message wall. Anyone can leave a note. Anyone can respond. At first, it's all anonymous. I forgave you, even if I never said it. I still wear the scarf. You were my real name. Then gradually, people sign with initials, a name or two, and then bravely faces a man. Leaves a photograph of himself, barely 20, with the caption, "To the boy who wore the same cravat twice, just so I'd notice." That night, someone else pins a hand-drawn portrait underneath. You recognize the boy in the sketch. You sold him a paper swan weeks ago. One night, the librarian approaches with her arms full. Dozens of books, wrapped in worn silk and tied with garden twine. Each contains a story. Each was almost forgotten. She calls them the unshelved. Some are incomplete, others smudged beyond repair. But every one was written in code. You and she volunteer to help restore them, gently, reverently. Not to fix, but to unearth. The final one she gives you is the oldest. And inside it, pressed flat like an autumn secret, is a dried peacock feather. No words, no title, just that unmistakable glint. You exhale, they found us. And that night, after the fire burns low, you sit beside her in bed. She reads while you write. You pause sometimes just to watch her lips move, silently sounding the rhythms of other people's hidden hearts. You wonder how many of those people feared they'd never be remembered. You wonder what message you'll leave. One day, when your time is done, but you don't dwell, because right now she's here. You're writing, the rain has stopped, and someone, somewhere, is folding a letter they'll never be brave enough to send. And still, they fold it carefully. You wake before dawn. The air has that particular stillness that only happens right before something changes. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet shifters, though the whole world takes a breath and holds it. You rise without waking her. Barefoot, you pad through the house. The wooden floors creak like old friends. Outside, the fog is soft and blue-grey, lacing through the hedgerows like ribbon. The world is muffled. Even the birds hold back. In the distance, you see a figure by the well, hooded, holding something. You know who it is. It's the old postal carrier. The one who retired decades ago, who's lived on the hill with 3 cats and a pocket watch. No one ever sees him wind. He's cradling a book. It's not bound in leather or cloth. It's stitched in hair. Human hair. You blink. He hands it to you. She said you'd know what to do with it. No more explanation. He walks away into the fog, humming something faintly. Baroque. Back inside, you study the object. It's horrifyingly beautiful. A Victorian mourning book, made entirely by hand. Hair embroidery was once a real craft, sentimental, symbolic, and yes, absolutely unsettling. But this isn't just memorial. This is message. Each braid of hair forms a word in an obscure tactile code, a kind of haptic Morse. You run your fingers over it, slowly. The message forms in your mind like smoke curling into shape. To be forgotten is not the same as being erased. You shiver. That's when she appears behind you, draped in a shawl, sleepy-eyed. You felt it too. You nod. She rests her head against your back. Together, you begin decoding. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with hair mementos was simply fashion or something darker. Mourning jewellery, hair wreaths, love lockets, they were all ways to carry a person with you, to keep them close. But some scholars think the Victorians weren't just preserving memory, they were trying to trap it, pin it down, like butterflies under glass. You think maybe both can be true, because grief, after all, is also a language, and sometimes the only way to speak it is with threads, pressed pages, and long silences. You make tea. She lights the lamp. In the message room, and today is archive day. Once a month, the town brings everything they've saved. Secret letters, cryptic recipes, brooches with moving parts. Everything is catalogued, scanned, whispered over, guessed at, or read aloud. Some of the messages are laugh-out-loud funny. One woman encoded a marriage proposal into a laundry list. He accepted by burning his half and baking her a scone. Others are heartbreaking. One man painted tiny bees on a single glove, over and over, for the wife who stopped wearing perfume. She knew what it meant. He never said it aloud, and some are simply mysterious, like the map drawn on the underside of a drawer, or the spoon bent into a spiral and buried in peat. Everyone guesses. Not everyone is right. That's the fun of it. As the day winds down, you sit by the fireplace with the others, tea in hand. Laughter soft. The librarian begins to read from a newly restored piece. It's unsigned, but familiar. The ink is slightly lavender. The phrases too careful, the syntax too modern for the supposed date. To the one who finds this, you have not misread. This letter is for you. I don't know your name. I don't know your time, but I know how you feel. You're trying to translate something that keeps changing. You're speaking a language without vowels, searching for someone fluent in echoes. Me too. There's a pause. Someone near the window exhales. You don't say a word, because you wrote that 5 years ago, and someone else just found it. Later that night, you return to the journal, the original one. The one with the wax and the warnings and the aching, coded pages. There's one last entry, it's written sideways, in gold ink, faded nearly to invisibility. You angle it under candlelight. The script is crooked, rushed, but unmistakably her. Rosewax girl, if you are reading this, You have become what we were too afraid to be. Open, honest, remembered. Then a symbol, a spiral swallowing, a key. And finally, our stories are not puzzles. They are bridges. Walk gently. You look over at her. She's fallen asleep by the hearth, curled like a cat, one hand still holding her tea. Her hair falls across her face, catching firelight in threads. You smile. This isn't about solving a mystery anymore. It's about becoming the kind of person who understands why the mystery mattered. You tuck the book away, not hidden, not buried, just placed where someone else might find it. Then you write one more note, just one. You fold it 3 times, sharp and clean, and you slide it into the listening wall. We still write, we still remember, we still love, and that's enough. And so you settle. Deeper now, the fire is low, the house is quiet. And somewhere in the folds of your blanket, the weight of so many stories holds you steady. You think of ink drying on velvet paper, of candle wax sealing words no one can read aloud, of fingers trembling as they tie knots in red thread, hoping someone, someday, will know what they mean. You are not alone. Others have sat in this stillness. Others have loved like you do, fiercely, secretly, beautifully. The Victorians may be long gone, but their echoes curl through the quiet like silk in water. Let them hold you, just for a little while longer. Tomorrow there will be more messages, more laughter, more questions, and yes, maybe more code. But for now you can rest. Let your breath slow. Let the stories wrap around you like a second blanket and drift. Just drift.